the President and CEO of Life Sciences BC. And Wendy, over to you.
Thanks, Ryan. Welcome, everyone. As Ryan said, my name is Wendy Hurlbert. I'm the President of Life Sciences BC, and welcome to our webinar entitled Quantum-Inspired Drug Development. As we begin, I would like to acknowledge that I'm joining this event from within the ancestral, traditional, and unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, including the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. I'd also like to acknowledge that many of our attendees are joining from other traditional and unceded Indigenous territories across this beautiful province and country. Thank you for joining us. We're excited to be here to host this event virtually. Over the past year and a half, Life Sciences BC and our community have fortunately embraced virtual events. One of the advantages of being virtual is that we have attendees from across the globe attending Life Sciences BC events routinely. So if you fall into that category, welcome. We're grateful to have the opportunity to continue to host webinars and events and bring the life sciences community together. Today is about quantum-inspired drug development, and it's sponsored by Fujitsu. Fujitsu is a leading multinational information and communication technology company at the forefront of driving enterprise-scale digital transformation initiatives in organizations and communities around the world. In late 2018, they established a unique team based in Vancouver called Fujitsu Intelligence Technology Limited. They operate as a decision science customer innovation center, focusing on helping organizations harness the power of artificial intelligence and quantum-inspired computing to solve problems and transform operations. Fujitsu is a silver level sponsor of LSBC and the presenting sponsor of this webinar. For those of you that do not know Life Sciences BC, or LSBC as we refer to ourselves, we're a member-funded not-for-profit society. Our members consist of academia, research institutions, centers of excellence, and funding agencies, emerging and small and medium enterprises, and growing digital medtech therapeutics companies, and those companies that support the life sciences ecosystem broadly. We're funded through membership and the generous contribution of our sponsors. At each event, we like to recognize some of our newest members. Today, we want to recognize GrandTech, Immunoprecise Antibodies, and Incisive Genetics. Thank you for joining us. We're always welcoming new members, so please reach out to any of us at LSBC or visit our website for more information about membership. Now on to the program. To start, I'd like to introduce Dean Palazzi, the VP Head of Business Development and Marketing at the Fujitsu Intelligence Technology Limited. Dean has worked at the leading edge of innovation for over 25 years in Canada and the US in sales, marketing, product management, and now has the privilege of leading the global innovation team at Fujitsu Intelligent Technologies, assisting customers in embracing new opportunities with emerging technologies while helping to drive Fujitsu's global innovation program. Previously, Dean was on the founding team of Canada's Digital Technology Supercluster and served as an executive in residence with BioEnterprise Corporation. Earlier at Innovate BC, he led development and was the managing director of the BC Acceleration Network and Venture Acceleration Program. He has served on the steering committee for Innovate BC's Ignite program and as a longtime member with New Ventures BC as a mentor. Dean has earned an executive MBA in technology strategy and marketing for the University of Ottawa in 1997 and served on the board of the Kids Upfront Vancouver for 5 years. Now, please join me in welcoming Dean to say a few words and kick off the webinar. Over to you, Dean.
Thank you very much, Wendy. Excellent. Let me just get things going here. Okay. Well, Wendy, thanks very much for that very warm welcome. And it certainly is great to be here. And it's my pleasure to share this short introduction to Fujitsu in advance of the main event, Quantum-Inspired Drug Development. As Wendy mentioned in my bio, I'm with this group. It's an innovation division of Fujitsu called Fujitsu Intelligence Technology right here in Vancouver. And it's by no means the only presence that we have in Canada, and I'll get to that a bit later. In Vancouver here, we're a specialized team that was established in 2018 by Fujitsu's headquarters in Japan, and our team is comprised of innovation consultants, digital transformation visionaries, data scientists, operation and research scientists, and software engineers. In many ways, I guess you could say our team is really truly motivated by the power of artificial intelligence and quantum-inspired computing, which you'll hear a little bit about today. We really focus on trying to help our customers solve problems and harness what we think are very real opportunities related to what we're all familiar with, this increasingly vast stream of data driving today's modern enterprise and society in general across all sectors. As depicted in the slide, we also serve as the local gateway to absolutely enormous innovation capacity inside Fujitsu globally, which we can leverage when needed to support our team's efforts in North America. Globally, Fujitsu is one of the largest technology consulting and solution companies in the world, with customers in well over 100 countries. And now more than ever, we're really helping to drive our customers' digital transformation agendas well beyond our more traditional ERP and systems integration practices. From an innovation point of view, we spend about 2.5 billion in R&D annually and are generally among the top technology patent holders in the world. And importantly, in the realm of artificial intelligence, we're among the top 10 patent holders in the world at last count, just behind Google and Microsoft. Leveraging expertise from business units and our research divisions, as well as advanced AI intellectual property, we've developed and deployed AI applications around the world. And right here in Vancouver, our team has developed several AI solutions, including what we call patient treatment optimization, which is predicting optimized patient care for a select chronic disease to minimize patient risks and health system costs related to the patient care pathway. So our investments in R&D and AI in the AI arena really serve as a key differentiator for us, and also in the realm of advanced computing with extraordinary innovations such as Fujitsu's digital annealer, as well as Fujitsu's supercomputer project, Fugaku. Currently, the most powerful supercomputer in the world, which we developed in collaboration with a team from the Riken Center for Computational Science in Kobe, Japan. And it's currently deployed on a range of monumental problems, not the least of which includes COVID-19 research, population health, and climate change. And finally, in this day and age, I'm really quite pleased to emphasize our commitment to the environment. Fujitsu has recently doubled down on our commitment to sustainable development goals and has been listed on the Dow Jones Sustainability Index for over 21 years. On a global basis, we're honored to have many of the world's most recognized brands as our customers and partners. Spanning most core sectors driving the global economy, Fujitsu technologies and solutions are the backbone of many industries and many governments, and are now serving to digitally transform enterprise scale organizations and societies around the world. Closer to home here, we've been operating in Canada for about 45 years with over 1,200 employees across the country. This footprint includes 3 digital innovation hubs, our East Hub in Montreal and Quebec City, our Central Hub in Toronto, and our Western Hub in Edmonton, and of course, our team here in Vancouver as well. And also we have 3 development centers in Ottawa, Quebec City, and Edmonton. We also have a significant investment in partnership with the University of Toronto, Fujitsu's co-creation lab, and I think it's probably one of the largest research programs at U of T in terms of number of professors and postgrads involved. Our focus there really is advanced R&D on quantum-inspired computing, hardware, software, and applications. So in conclusion, I want to thank everybody for joining us today, and thank you to Life Sciences BC for hosting today's event. Thank you to my colleagues in the UK that are giving up their dinner hour to be with us today. And really, Fujitsu's digital annealer is truly a remarkable innovation, and we're excited to share how this technology is really driving a new paradigm in the drug discovery arena. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, Dean. It's great to see everything that's going on in Vancouver and in Canada with Fujitsu. It's certainly been an exciting journey since you guys established it here. But now we're going to jump across the pond, so to speak, and hear from 2 of Dean's colleagues who are based in the UK to talk about quantum-inspired drug development. So I'd like to introduce our speakers first, Ellen and David. So Ellen Devereaux is currently working at Fujitsu in the role of digital annealer consultant and product manager for their inspiring drug discovery platform, bringing her passion and expertise in analytical thinking and complex problem solving. Ellen is inspired to realize the potential that technology and people have to digitally transform the world. Since joining Fujitsu, she has been involved in a number of special high-profile projects, including as the technical lead for the Space Debris Program, collaborating between consortium members and the UK Space Agency. Through the successful implementation of this project, an invitation to present at the European Space Conference was extended. Prior to Ellen's work at Fujitsu, she worked as a research analyst at the Cullum Center for Fusion Energy and holds a Master of Physics from the University of Bath. Ellen has a background outside of her technology achievements as a sailing and gymnastics coach, and has been approached to coach at a national level in a class of boat in which she was twice been the world champion. Youth world champion. So Ellen, clearly very accomplished, would love to hear about presenting at the space conference, but we'll save that for another day. So Dr. David Snelling, he is currently the program director leading Fujitsu's Artificial Intelligence and Quantum Initiative for the Northwest European region. He currently has a special focus on Fujitsu's quantum-inspired digital annealer program that rapidly solves complex combinatorial optimization problems without the added complications and costs typically associated with quantum computing through a digital circuit design inspired by quantum phenomena. During his time at Fujitsu since 1997, David has performed various roles in research and technical capacity, culminating in him being elected as a Fujitsu Fellow, the company's highest technical honor. David's professional input has ranged widely, encompassing many forward-thinking innovative technologies, including deep learning, energy efficiency, quantum computing, information modeling and ontologies, graph databases, distributed systems, and computer systems architecture. So welcome, Ellen and David. Thank you very much for joining us. As Dean said, they're both based in the UK, so they are sharing, I guess, their dinner hour with us right now, or delaying their dinner hour. So the format for this webinar, it's going to be a panel discussion. And so while we have some prepared questions, we're hoping that this will be interactive. So please add your questions to the Q&A and I'll be monitoring them. And as Ryan said, there is an upvote option as well. So we're going to kick this off with Ellen. And Ellen, I want to touch base with you. The pharmaceutical industry has been disrupted over the past year, and we've seen some amazing stories of innovation. What key breakthroughs have been made that the pharma industry can learn from moving forward?
I mean, all in all, we've seen some great stories from healthcare organizations, pharmaceuticals, as well as other industries. And I think the main takeaway from the past year is the power of working collaboratively, which is something that Fujitsu makes central to all of our work, making the customer part of the decision-making committee every step of the way. When it comes to quantum, the technology can be applied in a number of different scenarios, from drug discovery to logistics through to space. And we've seen real value in collaborating with partners and customers. The quantum-inspired tech allows us to realize the need for speed, because the pandemic has shown everyone that we need to respond quickly. And using technology allows us to accelerate the pace of change whilst still trying to be flexible in the approaches that we take.
That's great. Thank you, Ellen. David, did you have anything to add, or I'm going to jump to my next question?
You go to your next question, and we'll get on. I have great confidence in our audience to start providing extra content.
Okay, excellent. So, David, quantum-inspired technology has shone through as a key enabler to accelerate change and disruption. Are you able to explain quantum-inspired optimization and what kinds of problems the technology is best suited to address within the pharma sector?
So one way to look at the quantum-inspired digital annealer, as we call it, is that it is kind of a stepping stone or an on-ramp between classical computing and quantum computing. So from a technological perspective, it's traditional technology, the same kind of silicon that's in your mobile phone and so forth. And it doesn't require a refrigerator the size of an elephant or something to keep it nice and cold and behave itself inside magnetic shields and so forth. It can just sit in it can actually sit under your desk if we have it such, but usually we put it in a data center and make it available by the cloud. What it is inside as a technology, okay, is it's a special purpose piece of hardware designed to solve combinatorial optimization problems. And so what it does is it says, I have a problem that's in this category. We can go into some details about what that looks like if anybody's interested, but it is designed to solve exactly that one problem. And as a result, the nature of the special purpose hardware means it can't, it can't glorify or beautify your web page, but it can solve your combinatorial optimization problems extremely rapidly. What we've done with this particular project, the drug discovery one, is to apply this technology, this capability of sifting through thousands and, well, billions and billions of possible combinations to identify what the best starting point for a drug molecule is. And of course, we'll go into a little more detail on that. So that's what we've done with the digital annealer. And we've done it inside Fujitsu in two different categories. The project that Ellen and I worked on was therapeutics for things like, small molecule therapeutics for dengue fever and COVID. And a team in Japan worked with PeptiDream to work on the larger molecule kind of therapeutics. So that's basically a quick overview of what it is. It has wide applications outside drug discovery. I guess space debris removal gives you some indication of the breadth of what it can do. It can also do the classical, really routine stuff of optimizing warehouse picking. So from the whole spectrum, from space to warehouse.
That's great. Thank you. I look forward to diving into that a little bit more. I want to switch back to Ellen. So we've heard the benefits that quantum can have on the early stages of the drug discovery process, delivering novel molecules in weeks instead of months. Thinking about the biggest challenges in the pharmaceutical sector, where else do you see quantum being applied and making the most impact?
Absolutely. So I think at some point, Dave will go through kind of how we've applied this technology specifically to this problem. But more broadly, in the pharmaceutical industries, there's lots of areas where quantum and quantum-inspired technologies could have an impact. The obvious starting point and likely most interesting to chemists is molecule modeling and protein modeling. That's using quantum technology to simulate quantum mechanics, and obviously is much easier to do with a quantum computer than it is with standard hardware. That's definitely what's been heralded for a lot of chemists. But the technology for that type of work is still really many years away. If you imagine each molecule requires several qubits, and we're still only in the 50 qubit region before we start talking about error cancelling. What we can do, use the technology available today, is to optimize 3D similarity searches. We can also consider supply chain optimization. Like Dave said, we can go into the more mundane stuff, like warehousing and supply chain, as well as considering the drug manufacturing cycle and optimizing the space there.
Given the worldwide supply chain constraints on so many industries, that mundane area is probably of great interest to many that we may.
I only say mundane because it's less of an interesting problem to solve, so to speak.
No, I know, but it's been impacting everybody, including, as you guys were saying, the petrol shortages. But getting back more onto our topic, we actually have some questions that I'm going to interject into our discussion. So Dave, it's an interesting question because I had it myself. So is quantum-inspired computing not actually quantum computing? Is it just parallel and faster computing for possibilities? Could you please explain the difference?
Yeah, so in true quantum computing, the properties of superposition and entanglement, and in the case of quantum tunneling are delicate quantum processes that can only be observed at cryogenic temperatures down near absolute zero. The digital annealer mimics these, but it does not actually have quantum. It is not a quantum device, except in the sense that anything that does things with electronics is by definition using quantum properties, but not in the sense that people mean quantum computing with the superposition and the entanglement. But what the digital annealer does do is, as a technical device, it has a very high degree of parallelism built into it, because it's focusing on just one kind of computation, that a combinatorial optimization problem. It's able to act as if it was a 130,000 core data center on a single chip. And that kind of power is a significant step change in solving these combinatorial optimization problems. And it, because of the high degree of parallelism, it kind of mimics, if you will, the notion of superpositioning. So yeah, direct answer, no, it's not a quantum device. It's a standard conventional device, but very, very quick indeed.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dave. There's another one for you. So, dear Dr. Dave,
I saw that, yeah.
can you please comment on perspectives of using AI oracles and in general, the guess, learn, and test paradigm for tackling combinatorial problems in phenomenal time, in polynomial time?
So the trick with attacking combinatorial optimization problems with machine learning and AI in general is developing the training set. Okay, and one of the big challenges that we have in a lot of fields is we can describe the problem, but we can't generate the training set. So one of the things that you can do, for example, with quantum devices, is if you train them up, for example, there's a concept called a Boltzmann machine that can be used to sample a modeled space that you partially understand and actually use that to generate training data for a machine learning environment. So there's a lot of crossover in this space. Now, unfortunately, I'm not an expert in using AI to generate and drive the guess learn process in a drug discovery context. So I can't really go down too far into that. But in, like, for example, in the space of machine learning, where you're looking for an anomaly, a fault or something that occurs very rarely, you can model that fault very easily and then use things like quantum computing to generate examples and then train. But the challenge with the question is actually going for the, how is it you actually generate the training set?
Right, which I think is probably one of the bigger issues that gets talked about quite a bit. So please, for the audience, please continue to add questions to the Q&A. I'm monitoring them quite closely. Ellen, I want to turn to you for a sec. As with any big disruptive technology, it's understandable for people to have their doubts. How can pharmaceuticals ensure that they maximize the benefit of innovation whilst minimizing the risk, essentially creating an ethical framework?
Sure. I mean, at Fujitsu, the way we approach this is as we develop new solutions, we co-create with industry specialists to ensure that when we build our solutions, they have value for the customer. We're talking in the customer's language, and we're not focusing on the technology, we're focusing on the customer's problems and how do we solve those. So we start with a feasibility study to ensure that we understand the problem and that we can build a solution using the digital annealer. And once all the parties are in agreement, we can then carry out a proof of value, building a solution based on real historical data. And once we've proven the value of the solution, we'd move to a minimum viable product, architecting the solution to fit into the customer's current process and managing the change between the two. And at any stage in that process, should it be found that the digital annealer isn't the right technology or we're not able to provide enough value, we're comfortable to walk away and go, we don't want to do anything that isn't valuable for the customer. And that way of working with the customer, minimizing the risk and making sure that we've proven it at every stage is the way we work. And then central to our current method of implementation is safe and agile at all stages. So there's never any risk to operations.
Right. I think this question is for you, Ellen. Elisabetta is asking about more details about the applications. You mentioned 3D, similarity, logistical problems. Can you expand on that?
So we've looked into the possibility of using the digital annealer to solve 3D molecular similarity problems. The solution we have at the moment is somewhat 2D. It's slightly more complex than that. And 3D is something that we're aware we could do potentially, but haven't yet looked into. Logistical problems are more of a standard solution for combinatorial optimization. One of the classic solutions that we often teach at an early stage is the traveling salesman problem. How do you visit all of the cities you need to, taking the most appropriate route? And so logistics can always be thought of in that respect. If you've got a certain number of transportation devices, lorries, boats, trains, cars, and you've got a certain number of routes available, and they've got a certain number of stops that they need to make, what is the optimum route for each of those, whilst meeting the constraints of maybe your driver safety laws or your working hours, and when do you need to refuel? All of those things get considered. So those are some of the more standard problems. In terms of manufacturing, which I think was another one I mentioned earlier on, it depends on each process in general, but any point where you're able to make a decision, do we do this next or do we do that next? Especially when those decisions become more complex and there's 8 different roads you can go down using 3 different trucks, for example, that's a prime example of when the digital annealer would be useful, either to find a more optimal result or to find you the same or more optimal results in a quicker amount of time. So previously we've used this in manufacturing of BMWs. They were struggling to get their throughput through their plants, and the bottleneck was a welding machine. We reprogrammed their welding machine to take a more optimal route to get the welds done in a shorter amount of time. And that way they were able to do more cars in the same amount of time without building a new factory. So it's those kinds of decision-making processes that the digital annealer is ideal for solving. Does that answer the question?
I think it does. I'm going to move to David for the next question. And this was brought up at the beginning, and with quantum-inspired technology being able to rapidly solve complex combinatorial optimization problems, many of which Ellen just talked about, a few of them, without the added complications and costs typically associated, where will quantum deliver the most value for pharma companies?
So what I'm looking at this is kind of an interesting one, because the pharma industry, particularly when you start thinking about the technical drug discovery, computer-aided drug discovery, it's a very advanced industry with some very sophisticated strategies and approaches. And for newcomers to that field, Ellen and I always joke about we get to learn something new every year. It's been quite a fascinating challenge to look at what can and cannot be done at what speed with current technologies. So to tell you about the project we developed on the drug discovery that we've been talking about, the one we applied with Polaris QB on dengue fever and COVID-19 therapeutics, we were looking to use that basic kind of pipeline, but rather than starting with a mass screening search, we wanted to start, of course, with a virtual molecule library. So we built a molecule library that was between 10 billion and 1 trillion molecules, depending on the use case we were looking at, and used the digital annealer to sample molecules that met most of the constraints that we wanted for our target pocket in the protein. So we had biochemists work with us to identify the pocket shape and structure we were looking for, identified what kind of pharmacophores needed to bind where, and some basic geometric structure. Then encoded that information into the, as we call it, the QUBO, the quadratic unconstrained binary optimization problem. That is what the digital annealer solves. And then we use that as a basis to sample out from the multi-trillion potential molecules represented by the combinatorial library, sample out about 1,000 molecules of interest. Then we use those 1,000 molecules into some of this absolutely incredible computational drug discovery platforms. In the case of Polaris, they were specialists in quantum mechanic and molecular dynamic interaction software, and would run each of the 1,000 molecules through a number of different, I can't remember the word, different formations of the molecule. There's a special word I'm supposed to use, and I've forgotten what it is, to get what its most likely minimum energy binding in the pocket was. And from that process, which of course was run on a massive cluster of high performance servers over a week or two, gave us a handful of around 20 or 30 molecules that we went started a more traditional pick and choose prep for synthesis. And then those molecules, for example, with dengue fever, are now in through the synthesis and testing process. In short, we've taken the traditional mass screening approach and moved it from a couple of years down to about 8 months, including the synthesis and testing. So that's kind of what we've done. What we find is interesting about this is that in addition to this faster, cheaper kind of thing, because you're starting with a library of 1 trillion molecules, you get a much more diverse source of information, source of potential chemicals. Your chemistry space is much larger to choose from. And then as a result, what you get out of it, hopefully it's better quality than you might have started with before because you had that aspect. But most importantly, your chances of being in an intellectual property free domain are much, much higher because you're actually looking at de novo molecules. So that's kind of the nutshell of the benefit from the quantum inspired digital annealers application in drug discovery.
Thank you. That's super interesting. I mean, it's such an exciting time, and clearly that speed, we saw the benefit of that over the last couple of months as we saw much innovation come to market quickly. There's an interesting question here that takes us a little bit beyond the pharma sector. And it is, which field sector do you think provides the most low-hanging fruit where quantum computing could provide useful insights or solutions? And if quantum isn't being used in those spaces yet, what have been the hurdles?
Dave, do you want to take this or do you want me to?
I'll take the first shot at it. Okay. The areas where we've seen quantum computing make the biggest jumps and potential early jumps is, and I don't want to insult anybody in the quantum computing community, but it's where you use the quantum computer as more like an analog device. Because we used to do this with computing all the time. We had analog computers and we would build an analog computer that behaved like the physical system we were trying to model. Now, I think when we get to the early stages of modeling, and this is where drug discovery is the perfect place for this, is the quantum computer building one that acts like a molecule, okay, is going to be much easier to do than programming a digital computer to do all the simulations of, energies and directions and vortices and so forth that you would have to model in order to simulate it digitally. And so it's in spaces and regions like that where the device models the domain. And this comes out beautifully in the quantum annealing, because D-Wave's machine is actually a machine designed around the concept of a Hamiltonian, minimizing its energy. And because a combinatorial optimization problem can be coded up as an Ising model, then the D-Wave is able to behave exactly like its physical equivalent, which is the Hamiltonian. And so it solves the problem that way. And so those are kind of the two areas where I see something really significant happening early on. And drug discovery is lucky to be at the heart of that, along with material sciences. The second half of that question, I could dump on poor Ellen.
I've got a couple of points I can add.
Yeah.
There are kind of two approaches. If we're looking at annealing types of solutions, the very low-hanging fruit for those is logistics, like we were talking about. They're the classic problems. Ultimately, the quantum is not yet ready to be used in those spaces. D-Wave have a 5,000-bit machine, and that can start to solve some reasonable problems, but maybe not large enough for real-life problems. But that's why there's use. So I am kind of jumping on to the next question in the Q&A, but it answers the previous question as well. That's the reason why we're selling the digital annealer today. It's capable of solving these problems at a scale that is reasonable for real world applications, because it's not got that difficult quantum architecture. So quantum isn't yet ready to solve real world problems because there's still an awful lot of development that's required in the architecture. Think about building a computer. I don't know how to build a computer. I don't really need to know which way the electrons are flowing down the different wires and how I'm editing the register. And we're still in that stage for quantum computers. What we want to be able to do is be able to program quantum computers to do cool things. And until we've actually built quantum computers at a big enough scale and an accurate enough scale to be able to solve those types of problems, there's a gap in the market for quantum-like solutions available right now. So I kind of have answered Wolfie's question, but also if quantum's not being used in these spaces yet, what are the hurdles? It's the architecture that's holding us back.
Yeah.
So hopefully that covers both those questions in one go.
The next question, I think, there is a paper published. It's available on, I don't have the link instantly to hand. Perhaps Alex can dig it out while we finish and answer
There's
that
a
one.
paper on the Chem Archive, as well as a couple of white papers and journalistic papers.
I think it's probably the only thing with my name on it in the Chem Archive, so you might be able to find it out.
It's true.
So you talked about the architecture being one of the biggest hurdles. Obviously, you guys don't have a crystal ball, but based off of this conversation, I feel like you have a better crystal ball than most of us. Where would you, how long does it take? Like, where do you see this going in the future? When will these architecture issues or, do you address that will enable quantum computing to become more mainstream?
So I think that the first start to that answer is it is how long is a piece of string kind of answer, but probably to highlight the hurdles that true quantum computing is facing is probably the best thing to do, because and we're very close to home on this because Fujitsu is established, as you know, as I think Dean mentioned, working with Riken Institute in Japan. We're also working with them in addition to supercomputing on quantum computing. So we're starting to grapple with the challenges. One of the major challenges is noise in the quantum computing system. It does need to be very well shielded and protected. And as a result, in order to maintain the coherent state, you have to keep and maintain that coherence for as long as possible. Problem is that restricts how long your computation can be. And that becomes a major challenge at the moment. Simply building enough qubits that behave well enough is another one of the challenges. And once we have enough of them, then we have to connect them. And at the moment, we don't have the equivalent of lithographic imprinting for quantum circuits. So there's some serious technology steps along the way. But it's not just the engineering technology that needs to improve. Before we get to what are called really reliable, totally clean and noise-free quantum computers, there will be this NISQ era, the noisy quantum computer space. And in that universe, we need to be able to correct the errors that we know are going to happen. And so new kinds of error correcting algorithms, well, we've been around for years for digital systems, but digital systems by comparison are so reliable that we need, say, a handful, 6 or so error correcting bits for a full-size computer word. It goes the other way. You need hundreds to thousands, depending on who you're talking to, error correcting bits to manage one logical qubit in the current noise levels that we're seeing in quantum devices. So there's going to be kind of a convergence as the systems become more reliable, systems become more connected, error correction will become better. Eventually, they're going to all converge at about the right time. And that is probably between 5 and 10 years away from now, before we can actually start seeing anything more than experimental problems. Now, I don't want to put people off, because I think, particularly if you go back to this concept of treating the quantum computer as an analog device and designing a quantum computer for your problem, you could put that on a quantum computer simulator that is run on a supercomputer, and it might actually be easier to get an answer. I don't know, this is a research question, to send some people away to take a look at that one. But it's one of the things that I would like to explore, that if you have the right kind of problem, can you actually simulate an answer faster using a quantum designed concept and programming and circuit than you could with classical computing arithmetic. So 5 to 10 years is the short answer, but the other longer answer is much more fun.
It certainly is, and it's much more interesting. So I wanted to ask, I'm kind of going back to the logistics and the BMW example that Ellen talked about. And, this is taking us a little bit away from the technology and more into the application space, but we know across the globe in all of our various health systems that operate somewhat differently, that generally there's a lot of wastage within the system. And I was thinking, as you were talking about the BMW example, what are the potential applications within the health system to address, some wastage, which often comes from processes or lack of data being in the right place, while not compromising patient care and outcomes?
Absolutely. I think the best example of these types of problems and potential solutions using our technology and then potential future quantum technologies is within the scheduling space. So I don't know what it's like in the US right now, but I know in the UK we've got a huge backlog for surgeries and for treatments based on the fact that hospitals were dealing with COVID and not their standard routine things. So looking into the scheduling of operating rooms, the right members of staff and the right equipment being available at any point in time for the huge backlog could help to reduce that backlog more quickly. If in the moment that a patient hasn't arrived for their appointment, instead of that all being wasted, you can look at, well, that patient's arrived early, let's recalculate the rota, because we know we can do it in a second using the digital annealer, as opposed to it taking 4 hours on your standard computer or a person with an Excel spreadsheet. And we can recalculate that rota to go, oh, well, the MRI machine's free now. And so is the doctor that's actually required for that one, even though that they're not scheduled to see the doctor until later on or next week. And being able to deal with availability in the spur of the moment, because we're humans, there's always going to be people who don't turn up. There's always going to be something that means you have to stay home or you can't get to the hospital on time for whatever reason. And being able to recalculate on the fly is a capability that the digital annealer allows us. So that's one of my favorite examples. I'm sure there are many, many more. I mean, there's rota scheduling for workers, there's task scheduling. If you're considering what tasks does each nurse have to do, that might not be meeting with each patient. It might be more task-based in terms of, I don't pretend I know exactly what nurses do, and I don't want to undermine them by pretending I do. But if you could keep their schedules up to date, then maybe that makes their day easier. It means that they can get more done, and it means that we can deal with maybe people shortage, which I know again is an issue in the UK right now in our hospitals. So those are the kinds of scheduling ideas. And then I'm sure there's probably something to be done in the manufacturing space for healthcare, but I wouldn't know enough about it. And by all means, if you work in that space, please come to me with a problem that you think might be useful, because Dave and I can't be experts in every industry, but we are experts in our technology.
So you touched on one there that I found really interesting, Wendy, and that is you talked about the availability of data as being one of the big challenges. And I'd like talking about sort of 3 categories. You have the first category of information is, can you actually get the data? And that's all about data warehousing, data analytics, some of the IoT stuff in terms of just knowing what you have and what information is available. The next one is kind of the world of data analytics and machine learning, to understand what it means that the data you have, what does it mean? And what is it, what good is it? And prediction falls into that category. So can I predict when I'm going to need an MRI machine even before I know I need it? Once you have all that understanding, then the third step is to then take action and optimize on that action. And that's where the digital annealer is paramount. Okay, it can't help with the other two. It's not that kind of engine, whereas a general purpose computer can attempt all 3. But the DA is very special at dealing with that. Pick the best choice from all the information that we have captured and now understand. And that's how it sort of fits into a integrated pipeline. So we do a lot of systems integration with our customers as well to try and pull all of this together.
Right, and I think in particular in our health systems, no matter what region in the world we're in, access to that data can be super challenging. And I guess understanding how much data is required in order to set the digital annealer up to be working at its optimal, is that a challenge at times?
It is, and it's part of our co-creation exercise. We sit down, discuss with the client. We're working on trying to build a strategy around this. And one of our mantras is users, problems, and data, because we want the user in, and the user should come with a problem, because otherwise they're just wanting to spend money, and that never really happens in the real world. So we need a user and a problem, and we need them to come with their data. And so we work with the client to figure out just what data do we need, how much of it, do we need to anonymize it, or can we move the data? Can we move the work into the classified environment of that, or into the hospital environment, or just into the nation in question? One of the advantages of the DA is it's very easy to deploy it on premise if that tends to be the requirement. Typically, we've always done it by cloud because we can usually get away with that in terms of use cases. But the option is open to put an on-premise solution there that then allows people to work with a much more relaxed attitude towards data sharing and possible privacy.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay, so I'm going to just, for our attendees, have a last call out for questions, because we've got about 5 or so minutes left of the discussion. In the meantime, I'll keep going because it's lots of fun to learn about all of this. Dave, you just talked about the challenges of data. Are there limits in the size of the searchable space? Or maybe Ellen, you want to take that, because you're talking about your customers coming in with their data, but do you match that with data that the customers don't bring into the discussions?
But that would be down to a use case basis, I think. So far, most of the problems that we've addressed, the customer has somehow provided the data. Okay, so for our warehouse, we talk to the warehouse operators, and they dump the data set out from the middle of their pipeline, that kind of thing. For space debris, we got pointers from our partners at Astroscale to the International Data Repository of Tracked Space Debris Objects. And so there are many sources for the data. And so if you have a use case for which you don't have all the data, happy to work with you on that. But typically we start with data being somewhat available.
Right. Okay, that's good. That's helpful. Ellen, do you have anything to add to that?
I think just in terms of the drug discovery use case, we often work from a place of little to no data. It's a possibility, if that makes sense. So we know what the disease is that we're targeting, but if for whatever reason the customer hasn't looked into that, we can go away and build our own framework, and there's almost limitless numbers of molecules we can test for using this specific solution. So we can go away and build a fragment library that goes beyond anything we can consider, and it'll still be able to go through the DA. So that's kind of a very different use case to the standard DA use case, but still a lot of fun.
Because you're focusing more on the problem at the end as opposed to the data at the front. So how would you advise pharma companies to approach quantum computing in terms of capacity building, technological infrastructure, and partnerships?
I mean, that's a wild question.
That's an Ellen question, though. She's been working on that problem.
So we're looking at building an offering called a quantum value assessment, which is something that has become something that people are asking for before they even realize what they need. In pharmaceuticals, there's definitely a slightly different business case, because obviously, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of people are very interested about doing the quantum mechanics using a quantum computer, which makes a whole lot of sense. but there's a few stages that each pharmaceutical or in any industry would need to go through. And I'm trying to build an offering that would meet those stages. So the first stage is kind of understanding your own industry, understanding where it is that quantum will have an impact, where it could have some value, and where it's a risk to you. So that starts by understanding your own business and understanding your problems, probably a very easy step, but something that if we were to support you, we would want your help with doing. Then there's an education stage. What are the quantum technologies? Where is quantum going to impact anything? You know, is it quantum cryptography we need to be discussing? Is it quantum imaging? Is it quantum computing or quantum annealing? That needs to be a consideration. And if we're going down the quantum computing route, what style of hardware should you be considering for your use case? Should it be diamond based? Should it be semiconductor based? Should it be photon based? Photon and diamond is the same, doesn't matter. But that kind of idea. And there needs to be an education process of, we don't know your business as well as you do, and you don't know quantum as well as we do. So let's work together to make sure we've both got a good grounding. And then we can workshop together to understand where those can be applied to your business. So then the second stage is kind of figuring out, the third stage of this process would be coming together and workshopping potential use cases for quantum within the business. And then finally, there'll be a deep dive on the best use cases within that space. What's the technology? When are the horizons that that technology is going to be available? And then finally, there'll be a report. So there's kind of a 5-stage process that we would suggest. And whether you want to take that alone or whether you come to us for our support in that space, it's all open. But there's an education level as well as a workshopping and innovation space to it. And you can't do one without the other.
That's right. Dave, do you have any thoughts on that, or otherwise I will move to my closing question for you two.
No, that's fine. And as I said, that one's Ellen's specialty. We discussed it with a banking client earlier today, so it's just nice and fresh on it.
Yeah, no, it seems like it will be a great offering as people try and explore this and understand how to take advantage of it, and you have that guide to help. So I'm going to ask you both to think about, as you look ahead, what are you most excited about in this space?
If I may go first.
Yeah.
Personally, I'm super excited about so much we don't know. Right now, all of the focus in research for quantum, like I said, is on that hardware space, making quantum computers that are able to solve problems. But there's so many uses of real quantum computers that we just haven't figured out yet. There are a ton of algorithms that we know would be useful, but they rely on what they're calling oracles that no one's figured out how we actually build the oracle. And I'm just very excited about the potentials for those algorithms. Furthermore, obviously, there's so much we can do with the digital annealer today. There are so many optimization problems. It sounds really nerdy, but as a kid, I genuinely was excited by optimization. So hopefully, if anything I've talked about today has struck a chord with any of the viewers watching, then do please reach out to Dean and the local team in Vancouver, and or myself and Dave over in the UK. We'll keep it all linked up. But thank you very much.
Well, Ellen, your enthusiasm is very evident and infectious. Got me excited about it as well. Dave, what are you most excited about?
I think that in general, it's what's next. One of the great things about working with Digital Annealer is it was a one-time drug discovery. We've done the space debris thing. We've done warehouses. Ellen and I did a crazy project around sulfur trucks. Can you ship sulfur trucks here and there? I did aircraft monitoring, but the highlight of one of the years was I got the Digital Annealer to write 16th century counterpoint sacred music for me. It does a really good job. It's just wonderful stuff. So for me, it's what's next. And when quantum computing becomes more of a reality, that what next, which is always different with the digital annealer, we'll have a lot more choices. And the idea is, what can I learn next to put onto the digital annealer? I am a little bit like a man with a hammer. Everything looks like a nail. And sometimes I get it right. So that's what it is. It's the next challenge, the next problem, hopefully with user and data attached. So thank you very much. It's been a great day.
That's great. Thank you both for a fascinating discussion. I've certainly learned a lot, and it's been great to see people engage through the chat and through the Q&A. I want to thank Dean, who is still on with us, very much for his partnership and for Fujitsu as a silver sponsor. It's a great partnership. As Ellen said, if you want to learn more about this, you can reach out to the local team. Hi, Dean. And on our website, Fujitsu is profiled as a member. So if you're looking for their contact details, you can either go directly to Fujitsu or go through our website to find out how to connect with Dean. I wanted to bring a bit of attention to our upcoming events. On October 7th, we are having our Blake's Breakfast series, and the theme is on radiopharmaceuticals. Then on the 20th, we will be having an event with Gowling, which is titled From Discovery to Market, the Role of IP Strategy in Drug Development, a very nice carry on from this discussion. And in November, on November 3rd and 4th, is our annual Invest in BC Summit sponsored by Lumera Ventures. We will be announcing the companies that will be presenting next week, but tickets are on sale right now, so you're welcome to register through our website. Lastly, I'd like to thank all of our sponsors, without whose support we would not be able to undertake all the many activities that we do. We value you, and we really appreciate your contributions and support of our organization. And with that, thank you very much. I hope everybody in at least our time zone has a great day, and Ellen and Dave, you are free to go for dinner. Thank you, everyone.